It's going to be fun. Don't miss the ride. Don't be looking at the next mountain that you want to climb before you've climbed the one you're on.
Welcome to the Satori Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kovar, and with me today is Mr. Dave Chamberlain. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, sir.
The title of our talk is Life Lessons and the Value of Self-Discipline.
Oh my gosh.
And so just a little background, Dave Chamberlain is my partner and the CEO of Kovar's, and we've had a 20 plus year relationship and super lucky to have him on board. He came to our team with all kinds of experience. Another way of saying he's older than I am. But the reason why I wanted to have Mr. Chamberlain on the podcast is because he sincerely has, developed a lot of insight and wisdom over the years. And I want to just preface that, in my opinion, wisdom comes from experience remembered. And often that's hard times, the experience that you've got through. And I've firsthand seen, you handle some pretty challenging situations, with being calm and clear-headed and you've learned a lot along the process. So bottom line, why don't you just kind of give me a little bit, give our listeners a little background into your, where'd you go to school? What were your breaks in business, et cetera?
Oh, well, thank you for the nice words. And I'm happy to be here. It's a pleasure. I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio. Attended high school at Start Spartans. And from there, I went to Bowling Green State University and majored in education. I taught special ed for a couple of years and coached football and wrestling, and then joined IBM in the late 70s. And I guess probably
So you were Welcome Back Cotter, basically. Right?
Yeah,
you were
really,
Mr. Cotter from Welcome Back Cotter. Okay.
I really was.
So you young guys have no idea what we're talking about, but it was a big break for a very famous actor.
It's right.
Yeah.
Right. So I had a big mustache. And I had kids that were known as the Sweat Hogs, and so it really was.
John Travolta was the lead in that, by the way. That was his story, leading. Right. Anyway, didn't mean to get sidetracked. So you were your special ed teacher for a couple of years,
and then joined IBM, and then from there, was with IBM for 15 years, and left them in the early 90s, and began a career of startups and turnarounds, and joined the school at Granite Bay, Kovar's, as a result of a Wednesday folder that came to the house. I got a free month for Callie, my daughter. And so as a result, she went into martial arts, and I followed, and my wife followed, and we became a karate family.
Yeah. And at the time, though, you have had a lot, like you wrestled in school, you played football in college, so you were very athletic, and you were center, right? Although looking at you now, you're a pretty lean guy. You were a little bigger back then, I guess.
I was probably about 50 to 60 pounds heavier.
Okay. All right. And then you got into, somewhere along the way, you got into ultra marathons and marathons.
I did. I started, when I graduated, I had 50 to 60 pounds of weight that I didn't want. It was good. I was a bouncer in a nightclub before I started my job as a teacher. And so the weight was good for that, but it just was too much. So I started running. I would do a mile, and then I would add another mile the next day. And so before long, I was doing more mileage, and that turned into marathons.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. And then, you started training with us in the late 90s, maybe 2000 or something like that.
There? Yes.
Yeah. And at the time when your daughter started first, but you were actually like working in the Bay Area, so you could only make classes on Fridays and Saturdays or something like that, right?
Right.
And the reason why I thought that the life lessons and the value of self-discipline would be a really good topic for us is because we're both a couple of old guys that hopefully try to pay attention to what's going on. But also that, when I think of self-discipline, I think of myself as a pretty disciplined people and most people that know me would say that about me in most areas. Other areas, not so much, but I think I don't know anybody that like has a higher standard for themselves than you do. And by the way, that's a good thing most of the time. Sometimes it can be, as we often talk, one of your challenges, I'm going to be just up front, is that you often, when I'm saying you got an injury, you should probably take some time off, and you don't always hear that part, right? But so what drives you to like have this, and the other thing, just when it comes to business, is like if you're so good at, people brainstorm on an idea, and I might have them come up with an idea, and I go, yeah, I'll get right on it. And then I've forgotten about that idea by the time I get up to my office. And you like, next thing you know, I'm getting sort of an idea that you said you're going to act on. I'm getting the first 3 steps that you're going to take to make it happen. So, is that something that's just natural to you? Have you cultivated that?
Probably cultivated it a little bit. I'm a naturally intense person. So
really,
my wife likes to say that I'm intense about everything, including breakfast. So intensity times 10. But I've learned to kind of monitor that and then channel it in the right way. And I think I've always been curious about things, intellectually curious. And so when I see something that's interesting, I like to research it. If you have an idea and you've got 10 ideas before I even get into the office, they're always really interesting ideas. I like to know more about them. And so I think I've always been that way.
Okay. Well, so, let's just kind of look back. You have had, experience in a lot of different areas with health and fitness things. You've managed and led several companies and, hundreds and hundreds of employees and dealt with all the stuff that goes along with that. If you were to kind of sum up, you've got some young person that's just kind of getting started in life that's going, man, I want to get it right the first time. I want to try to make as few mistakes as I possibly can. Give me some steps I should follow. What would you tell them?
Well, I think so. First off, someone once told me at IBM, and it's just stuck in my head, that I'm at my best when things are at their worst. And so I took that as a supreme compliment because I really respected the man who said that to me. And so I think that what people have to remember is there's going to be adversity. And so what you have to do is keep yourself grounded, calm, and not get too wrapped up in panic and try to put together a game plan for how you're going to handle that adversity. So I think the first thing I would tell someone is that it's going to be fun. Don't miss the ride. Don't be looking at the next mountain that you want to climb before you've climbed the one you're on. And look, by doing that, you learn and you can apply the lessons to the next mountain when you're climbing it.
So you and I have talked about this many times, but a lot of our listeners will not have heard anything about this. We had a time in our business where we attempted to do a national expansion, and it didn't go as well as we planned. And actually, this started before when you were a student, but before you were actually, and then right at the tail end of this, when we were trying to figure it out, you brought you on as an advisor, and then the next thing you know, we managed to hire you as a full-time person shortly after that, CEO. But I remember you and I having a conversation one time when we were at our lowest point, and I think it was like December of 2007 is the month where we were just trying to figure out how we're going to make payroll and how we're going to keep this thing going. And people are telling us that we should file for reorganization, for bankruptcy, and neither of us wanted to do it.
Right.
And I remember you saying that quote, my belief is I'm at my best when things are at their worst and there's hope. And you're real quick. And, at the time I remember having this discussion about how we going to make payroll. And then I went down to train downstairs to do some jujitsu. And in the middle of the match, I'm getting, someone's applying a choke on me and I'm starting to panic, and not panic, but like, oh man, I might have to tap, which is not the end of the world. Right. But then I look up and I realize there's a third guy watching me. And if I pass out, he'll stop the match. I know it sounds morbid, but that's just how you think when you grapple. And so I've said, I could tap out, but I don't have to, not yet. And as soon as I got done, it was like, that's kind of where we are with our business. And I think I was leaning towards looking at reorganization, and you were leaning towards not wanting to fight through it. I remember going up and kind of, hey, I'm with you. And that was like kind of all right. That was when we kind of rallied, like, it was up until then, we was, what are we going to do? And okay, we're going to bust our butt. If we have to tap, right, we're going to tap, but we're not ready, not yet.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because we both had nights where we were looking up at the ceiling, wondering how we're going to make this work. But I will tell you, that's the best decision I ever made to come to work at Kovar's. And so I've loved every second of it, even the times when things were kind of challenging, because in their own way, we've talked about this. There were some really interesting times. And yet I look back at that, some of the ways that the teams pulled together. It's just incredible. And I actually have fond memories of that period of time.
It's so funny that you say that, because so many of our team members, we have great tenure in our company, and people have been with us for decades, literally. And the people that went through that era, the phrase goes, adversity doesn't make the person, it reveals the person.
Absolutely. And
like, we went to battle, and we're, coming through COVID, we had to go to battle again. We're still in a battle.
Right.
But when you've got a bunch of like people that got your back and are working hard and are willing to do whatever it takes, man, there's a lot of comfort in that, man.
Yeah, I look back on those times and learned a lot. And that's the point that I would tell someone who was just starting out in business is don't miss those opportunities to remember and to learn. They will come back again and again. So we're going through the financial struggles of 2007, and sure enough, 10, 12 years later, COVID hits, and we're going right back through them with same lessons that we need to have applied back then. We're applying all over again.
But the deal is there's a certain amount of confidence that comes when you've been through adversity. It's like, okay, this isn't really any fun right now, but we'll figure it out. You know, we'll figure it out. We'll ask the right questions. We'll do the right things. We're not going to, I think the thing is that sometimes people, the paralysis of analysis, they start like, they take no action versus kind of going, all right, man, you come up with a plan and then you do the best you can to execute on that plan.
Yeah. So for me, it all stems from habits, and, habits can be good. You can develop good habits, and then, the reverse is true. You can develop some bad habits. And so I've tried to develop good habits, and I almost, once something becomes a habit, it just gets ingrained. So the exercise, the fitness, the finances, I always have a goal. I have a short-term goal, a long-term goal, but I get into the habit of whatever it is that I'm doing that matters. I will continue to mind that. And it's funny, I was on vacation recently, and it was fun seeing friends, but I really missed my routine. I really did. And so it was great being on vacation. I was glad to get home and get back in my routine and my habits.
So give us some idea. Like you're a disciplined guy. You're an amazing physical fit shape, and of course you work at it. It doesn't happen on accident. So all right, man. My habits are terrible. I get up later than I should, and I turn on the TV and watch the news in the morning, and whatever's in the kitchen I might eat. And if I'm late, I'll stop by Dunkin' Donuts to get a donut. And that's I haven't really thought about. I should probably do something. Well, give me something tangible that I should add into my arsenal.
Yeah. So let me just tell a little story, and it really taught me a lot about approaching things the right way. So I graduate from college. I'm bigger than I want to be. And so I start running. And so I'm running 10 miles a day, and I drop 30 pounds, and then I kind of get stuck. And it's because I figure, well, if I run 10 miles a day and I don't eat, wow, now watch, all the weight's going to drop. And what happened was my body went into kind of hibernation, and I got stuck at a certain weight. And it wasn't until I started to do the research, the nutrition, and the way to do it the right way. And so I think it's important that whatever you decide that you want to do, that you research it, you understand, yourself, and don't try and do it all at once. Do it smartly and get yourself into the habits that allow you to add to the building block. So you start out small, and then you go a little bit larger.
So in other words, if two aspirin are good, 15 is not better.
True.
And I think what you said is like there's so much. Of course, one of the mastery mindsets we've talked about in other episodes is my word is law. There's so much to self-discipline, which is kind of the topic here. And I think you really nailed it on the head. Why most people fail is they set themselves up for failure by asking too much too soon. I haven't worked out forever, and I'm going to make these, I'm going to go cold turkey to the full extreme. Well, every now and then might work. But the key thing is, I think, to have some small habit, right? Like what James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits, like habit stack. You do one thing. Like if you want to start working out in the morning, first thing you do is just start by putting your workout clothes out the night before. That might be all you do. And then maybe you go to the gym and you just drive up to the parking lot of the gym. Maybe you just walk in and go on the treadmill for 2 minutes. But what you're doing is you're establishing a habit. Because if you set yourself up for success, then you, of course, can add on over time.
Yeah, and the thing that you do so well is your word is law. I mean, you really, when you make a commitment to do something, like you just got off of a 2-day juice fast, and you did it to just see if you could discipline yourself. And so I think those kinds of little tests are really good for someone. And so I really have embraced those mastery mindsets. Yeah. So again, for me, it's those building blocks. If I were, let's say that I wanted to take up, I don't know, whatever, a guitar, I probably wouldn't play for 3 hours. Okay. I would probably take it slow and build up the calluses and learn to work with it so that I could enjoy it long term, as opposed to saying, "Oh, I'm sick
By the
of
way,
it."
you did take up the guitar.
I did.
Are you still
actually.
playing?
I am.
Okay, I figured you were. There you go. So, but you started out small, a little bit here and there, and over time you get better. And
I know enough about myself that I can, if I'm not good at something right away, I just have to tell myself, don't get frustrated. It'll be okay. And so that's part of what drives me is I care a lot about what people think, but at the end of the day, it's what I think about myself that really is what drives me.
Yeah, but I don't know if you knew this. I probably told you I promoted myself to white belt 2 tips in guitar twice in my life. I've demoted myself again. No, I've demoted. I'm a no belt again. Yeah, I look at it every now and then and think, okay, yeah.
It's. I got to tell you, I played clarinet as a kid. And until the music teacher stopped coming to my house mysteriously one day, he didn't show up. I wondered what that meant. But so when I took up guitar, I wasn't sure how it would go. And after a while, I was playing some songs that I used to listen to on the radio, and all of a sudden, hey,
it doesn't sound too bad.
Feels pretty good.
Yeah. Well, sometime I got to bust out that guitar because next time we have a staff event, I'm going to sign you up. You can play. You can back up for Dana. We have a musician on staff that day. Okay. Well, habits. Okay. What about relationships? One of the things that you are really good at is first off, you understand the value of relationships, and it's better to have friends than enemies. And that's organic. You're not being friendly with people because you know it's good for business. It's just who you are. But how are you able to have what advice would you give to someone that's needs to have a hard talk with somebody and wants it to go well? What are some steps? I got to have a talk with a friend, an employee, a peer, and I got to tell them this. This things aren't right, and you want it to go well. What are some key things that have worked well for this?
Yeah. So for me, if you go in angry or you go in with an edge, it just never seems to go as well as you want it to. So I think you go in. If it's a friend, you go in with some love. You go in and with the intent of wanting to help them. And then you find a way, you craft the words, you slowly get into the area that is going to maybe be awkward, but you let them know, I care about you. And the reason we're having this conversation is because I do. I do care.
What you just hit on, what's so important is that, for me, it's always, okay, what's my desired outcome? Right. It's like, all right, and you and I have talked about this a ton about, we've got a situation. What do we want to have happen? And sometimes you just want to, your first gut instinct is, I'm going to let this guy know how I feel. I'm going to let this go to Galilee. It's going to feel good as you're saying whatever you might say, but later on, you're going to go, I wasn't very smart. So the other thing you said that I think is crucial is you got to have the right mindset. If you have a conversation with somebody and you are upset or angry with them, it's not going to go well.
Nope.
It's just not gonna. So the best time to have that conversation is when you're in rapport with that person, right? And they can feel that you respect and appreciate them, and then they're more likely to hear your words.
Yeah, when you vent, it feels good for about 5 minutes afterwards, and then you realize that it didn't do anything to repair the relationship or to help the person get to the next level.
Well, it's kind of like, you're mad at somebody, and apparently, I don't know, you probably heard this, but after Abe Lincoln died, or somewhere, a few 20, 30 years later, they found a drawer, an envelope full of letters to people in his cabinet, and that were vicious and angry, that he never sent. Yeah. It was just his way of dealing with it. It's like, okay, if after 2 or 3 days I want to send something different, and that's the challenge with email. I mean, I haven't done it too many times, but there's been a couple of times where I push the send button maybe a little sooner than I could have, and rarely has that ever worked out good.
It's never worked out for me. I think what's really interesting is, as I've gotten older, relationships have become more precious, because I've had this happen 3 times where I've gone to find someone that I hadn't talked to in a while, and so I try and track them down, only to find out they've already passed.
Yeah, wow.
And now all the things that I wanted to say, I can't say. So I try to stay in touch with people probably more than I ever have, that thank them for the things that they've done for me, and to let them know that I care about them.
It's such, it seems so obvious, but it's like, when's in a perfect world, I'd like to say every day, I don't every day, but several times a week, I will call an old friend just to have a conversation.
You're really good at that. Yes.
And there's a gentleman that his name was Steve Horry, and Steve Horry was, when I was a kid growing up in the martial arts school, he's about 10 years older than me. He was the tough guy at the school. He was like the alpha male in the group. And he was a good dude. He was kind of rough around the edges and came off as a bit of not a bully, but he was just the first one to make fun of you. If you had, spinach in your teeth, he was going to let you know. But at the end of the day, he was a really good dude. And I remember one time that the karate school that I started at, we shared a front door with a beauty salon. So you came in the door and then you went to the right or the left, right? So by the way, when I smell a perm, I always think of martial arts.
This is right down the street. Right?
No, this is actually on Arden Way. This was not the first school I started, although my schools always were next to beauty salons. I had 3 or 4 locations, but this one, the first one, the Bruce Jutnick School. Okay. And so I remember one time being in the lobby, I was 13 or 14 years old, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and the guys are hanging out after a sparring class, and this old lady walks in, and she's got a cane, and she's going to get her, she walks in the front door, and she's having a hard time getting the door open, and a couple of the guys start cracking jokes under their breath, and Steve Horry looked over at him like, "What the heck are you doing? How dare you?" And then he gets over and he helps her to her seat and goes back and goes about his business. But it left such an impression on me, because here's this guy that he's a tough guy, but here he is and he did all kinds of little things. And he used to come by, actually, you've met him one time, you wouldn't remember, but he used to come by the school every few years and say hi. Well, I share this story with you because he passed about 2 years ago, and I never got a chance to thank him for that. How big of a deal would it be to say, "Hey, Steve, I'm going to let you know there's a couple things you did when I was a kid that I've never forgotten, that I've looked up to." So
you're stirring a memory I have of my high school years. There were some kids that were kind of, I guess they were the ones that everyone picked on. And I look back, and I think probably everyone does this, but if they don't, I think it's a really good exercise, is to not forget some of the things that maybe you could have done better, so that you don't forget to have that humanity always at the ready and willing, because it will define you, and people will look at you a certain way. But more importantly, it's just the way you feel about yourself as a result of doing the right thing always helps.
I have 2 little thoughts on that. First off, a kid in junior high that was my on again, off again friend. We sometimes we'd hang out, but I remember one time him getting harassed. Not bullied, but 4 or 5 guys, giving him a hard time. And he was kind of on the lower end of the pecking order. Mm-hmm. And I remember I joined in for a minute. Yeah. And he looked over at me and he didn't say anything, but I could tell it was like, "Dave, I thought you were my friend." And it was like I got stabbed in the gut, and fast forward, like what I try to do when I'm at my better moments is I try to look for opportunities to notice, and appreciate there. And I got to share a story. So I'm at our friend Chance Burleson's at Promac in Dallas earlier this year, and it's lunchtime, and how I'm taking a nap after lunch religiously, and there's nowhere to take a nap, so I actually literally climb under the table that's got the tablecloth on it. And it's a perfect place. We're looking at one right now, right? It's a perfect place for a nap, and I have no shame in taking a nap anywhere. So it's lunchtime, and by the way, earlier that day there was this boy that's probably about 11 years old that was a part of this instructor college I was doing. And he was raising his hand and, and finally at one point I go, "Stand up for a minute. How old are you?" And he goes, 11. And I go, I stop the class. I go, "Hey guys, here's this 11-year-old playing full out. I think we deserve to give him a round of applause." So everybody claps for him. So the last of it, I don't remember that. So now I'm taking my nap under the table, and I hear this kid talking on speakerphone with his mom. Hey, Bobby, how are you doing?" "Oh, it's really good. Hey, Mom, they clapped for me."
Wow.
And and she goes, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, they clapped for me. I was, and it was like, it just warmed my heart that I'd forgotten that happened, but that's something he'll remember. And when we live on purpose, we can take those moments. I can do a way better job than I'm doing, to kind of notice the good work of others.
So this happened just recently. We have a staff member, Mariah Arasiga, and she's got this son named Xander, who's just
amazing,
a rock star.
Amazing.
And I was so impressed with him the other day. I thought I got to write her a note. So I wrote her a note and just urged her to write a how-to parenting book, because whatever she's been doing is just it's phenomenal. And she so appreciated that. So I guess my point in that story is it took 2 seconds to say that, and I think it made her day. But
100%.
It's one of those things where sometimes we neglect to follow through on some of those things, or we think if we're going to go see someone, I don't want to bother them, they're really busy. And you come to find out that they would have appreciated having you do that more than you could ever know. And so I think just don't let those kinds of things, don't let that thought enter in your mind. Oh, they're too busy. No, they're probably not.
So it's kind of like, my father had a bunch of one-liners, as you know, and we're actually putting them together, getting ready for his memorial. And so everybody's been writing in. There's this family thread of all the different one-liners that he had. And one of them was actually, you've heard me say it, I got from my pop. I believe it was originally Socrates, and it's be kind with whom you meet, for they are fighting a hard battle. And it's one thing to it just have it happen every now and then, but it's another thing just to make a decision. You know what? I'm really going to try to do a better job of that. Right. And there's so many different little things that you can do. I had an incident that happened where I was coming to work last week, and within 30 seconds, I had two perspectives of bringing value, and one of them was I'm turning onto taking a right, and I come into the crosswalk, and there's a lot of traffic, and I can't go for a minute. I look over and I see someone walking into the crosswalk, and I realize that I'm in their way. Okay. And so I'm about to back up, and he waves at me and smiles and points that he'll go around me. Mm-hmm. So he goes around behind me. By the way, I managed to get out before he crossed anyway. But the point was, just took him a second. It took him 2 extra steps. And that way, he wasn't, you could see how somebody else would go, what are you doing in my crosswalk? Right. So literally 14 seconds later, I'm in the left-hand lane, and I need to get to the right lane, and the car next to me wasn't going to let me get in. I'm speeding up, they're speeding up, I'm slowing down. It's kind of out of principle. You should have done it sooner. You kind of get the feel. And it's a reminder, which one am I? Which one am I? It's like, I don't want to be that guy that doesn't let people in. I want a guy that's going, takes an extra second and does the right thing.
Right. And the thing that I always remember is that while I'm doing maybe the right thing, there are people that are watching me, especially my children, right? But as they're watching me, and maybe I can set an example. It's kind of what we talk about with leadership. Yeah. If I am staying in touch with people, if I am doing the right thing, letting people in traffic, and not, doing the kinds of dumb things that get people in trouble, maybe I can influence others in my world.
Yeah, totally. And it's something that like I think I know I can do better. I'm better now than I was 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? It's like I see some of the people on our team that are so naturally thoughtful, and I think, why didn't I think of doing that? What a cool thing to do, right? It's like so. And the thing about this is when you do something kind for someone else, do they appreciate it? Heck yeah. Yeah. Does someone who sees it happening go, oh, that's why shows, like Extreme Home Makeover and all that are such big hits. Like, everybody gets to, when Simon Cowell says something nice about the singer, everybody goes, right? It makes everybody feel good. But you know what? You feel pretty good when you do something nice about it too. Yeah. Very cool.
Another story, just a real quick story that I wanted to also make sure that we tell our listeners that I really believe you never know what you can do until you at least try. You got to try. And so as I was doing these marathons, I got into ultra marathons. Anything over 26 miles is an ultra. Well, there's this race that they do every year out here called the Western States 100. And so I wanted to get into that race. And so I trained really hard, but there's a lottery, and I would go into the lottery and I wasn't getting selected. Well, finally one year I got selected. So I ran the race. I finished it. I was really proud. But here, my point is, there were plenty of people who probably doubted whether or not I could do it. That only fueled me to do it more. But I got done with that race, and I thought, there isn't a whole lot in life that I'm going to be challenged with that I won't be able to handle. If I could do that, I could do almost anything.
Well, so that's the value of like these, like you'd mentioned the 48-hour juice fast I just did, which by the way is pretty easy. If there's anybody on here that's done fast, you're rolling your eyes like, come on, man, that's missing a couple meals, but it's enough. It's enough to where you're hungry and you have to go, okay, are you going to give into this or not? And I think so much of it is our ability to be able to know we're going to follow through with what we're going to say. We're going to follow through with it. And so if you don't have, that's why, obstacles are a good thing. It's like if you don't have a challenge, you ought to get one just to see how you're going to step, you're going to step up, because then all of a sudden it gives you confidence going forward. Like if you can run 100 miles, which I've never done, by the way, but I did do a marathon and I jogged in my car afterwards. So that was more than 26.2. So technically, I guess I've run an ultra marathon. Yeah, because it was probably 26.3. Yeah, but it's like, but the more often that we can, and you can take this to an extreme or not, but just decide you're going to do it. That's what I love about. I know you do cold showers at the end of your shower. That's what I love about cold water immersion, which I'll do after my sauna, and I hate it. But who's the boss? Who's the boss? And it's kind of like, when you hear a kid saying, "You're not the boss of me," and we think I'm the boss of me. Well, if you give in to every little whim, you're really not the boss of you. I don't want tos, and I don't feel like it's the boss. So I think start small, and all of a sudden you're doing stuff that you didn't think you could do. You're running 100 miles.
Yep. And it all comes back to habits and starting at a reasonable level and building up and enjoying it so that you can do it for a long, long time. It's nothing worse than trying to get a habit that you hate. If you hate running, then after times of trying to do it, you discover that it's just not for you, then find something that you can at least enjoy as you're doing it.
It's funny that you say that, because I used to have this habit of finishing any book I started. And what happened is I'd get 30 pages into a book and I hated the book, but if I didn't finish it, I felt like I was a failure. And now I allow myself that. Right. It's like, if I'm not really into the book, I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm not gonna, but I'll very early on make that decision, because once I decide, okay, you got to read this thing, then I'm usually pretty good about doing it. All right. The one more thing, and of course, that I thought would be fun to talk about was kind of leadership and building a team. There's the phrase, it's the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right. And you built a lot of teams, and we have an amazing team in our organization. So what advice would you give somebody that's trying to build a cohesive team that likes to work together?
Well, my first piece of advice is to read the best business book I've ever read by Patrick Lencioni, The Ideal Team Player. It just does a great job of outlining what you should look for in staff and employees that you want to have on your team. So I think you need people that will embrace the vision, whatever it is that you have, and making sure that, if you have a small team and you do the wrong job at hiring, one person can really impact the team. So what you want to try and do is build that team as you grow it. They all have that same mindset that you've developed, and you've got them so that as you go out to look for those people, you look for that mindset, you interview for it. We always put people in situational interviews where they have to have a problem, they have to solve it and talk through it with us. And that'll help us understand whether or not they're the right person for us, so that we build that team of like-minded people. And after that, they police the group themselves. If someone comes into the group that doesn't embrace those ideals, they find out pretty quickly that they need to shape up.
Yeah. So, I mean, the bottom line is that it all starts with making sure you start with the right people. Right. It's kind of like, if I'm going to buy, if I've got, go to the sandwich shop and all the ingredients are great, but the cheese is moldy. I guess some cheese has mold in it, right? But you get, it's like the bread's moldy. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Right. It's still got, so it's kind of like the ingredients have to be there. And then of course, it's the deal is it like making sure that you make sure they know their job description, that they're trained right, and then it's treating them right.
Communication. But I do think it starts with us, the individual. We have to know what it is we're looking for. What do we believe in? What's our why? Why are we doing this? Before we start looking for people to help us build that why, we have to know what that is first.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Well, any closing bits of wisdom for anybody listening?
Yeah, so I think that one of the benefits that I've had in my life is the ability to be around great people, and so you're one of the people that I admire, and I've been blessed to be here for 16 years, and it's taught me so much. So just when you think you know it all and you have nothing left to learn, I'm proof that for 16 years I've learned every day about life and martial arts and business and how to treat people. And so thank you for having me on your podcast.
So, yeah, of course, it's an honor, and I would just remind everybody, man, it's the grass is greener where you water it. And a lot of times we look on with envy at other people's situations. And, there's a difference between having someone whose life you envy versus someone's life you admire.
Right.
If you think of someone in your life you envy, it's maybe some wealthy, a person that inherited $100 million and spends their life in the South Pacific, just drinking margaritas all day, and maybe you'd envy that. That doesn't really, but and then there's a life you admire, and pretty much anybody that you admire. Why do you admire them? Because they had adversity that they overcame. That's exactly really what it amounts to. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like. What do we got to do is the old proverb, bloom or plant it. It's like, all right, wherever you're at in your life, whatever you got going on, forget about what everybody else is doing. Like, oh, wow, look at it. Forget it. Take a breath. And what can I do today to have the most impact? And easy to say, hard to do, but worthy of the challenge.
Yeah. And something that's worth doing. We just continue to do it, and we never give up.
Yes. Yep. Just keep getting up. In baseball, there's 3 strikes and you're out. Bottom line is we just can keep swinging and swinging and swinging. Yep. All right, man. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Take care.